Translation Insights and Perspectives, or for short TIPS, is a tool and an ongoing project that collects specific examples of translations of the biblical text into many languages to offer insights that are otherwise not easily accessible. This tool has the following goals: to create a resource for Bible translators, for the worldwide church, and really for anyone with an interest in languages. It provides an opportunity to contribute data, and any data that is contributed is being verified by a team of curators before it is being published. It communicates the relevance of Bible translation and translation in general, and it shows the importance of language diversity and implicitly the need to preserve indigenous languages. This tool is available online for free at a very easy to remember web address, tips.translation.bible. tips.translation.bible. Let's go to the tool. You can see that the interface of the home page is very easily structured. You only have 4 different options in the top menu here. You can find stories of insights. You can submit such a story, or you can go to a help page that gives you some aid in navigating the site. We would like to encourage you to submit stories if you are aware of insights that can be had through the translation of specific biblical text in maybe your native language or in a language you're familiar with. You can submit that here. There's a detailed explanation on how to do that. But let's specifically look now at ways to find data in our project. We offer a number of different ways. One is by going through verses. And if you click on that option, you'll have all the different biblical books listed here. Opening a book then opens up a chapter view, and then of course the next view is the verse view. And you can see here in this example that in the first chapter of Genesis many verses are missing, and that is because we are only listing the verses and chapters and books that actually have stories associated with them. Presently we have about 1,800 different stories, and that refer to about 11,000 different verses in the Bible, and contain data from about 400 different languages. But data is being added all the time, so once you watch this video, there might easily be quite a bit more. You can also open the term phrase attribute option, and this opens up an alphabetical list, which then opens up to listings of English terms. Now, this is of course not a project that shows the translation from English into other languages. It's a project that shows the translation from Greek and Hebrew, the biblical languages, into other languages. And so you can see that the English terms really are only reference terms, and they are followed then by the Hebrew and Greek original term. Sometimes we are also talking about grammatical attributes, so not a specific word or phrase, but something where a different grammar of a language forces the translator to translate a text differently and gain insights through that. Lastly, you can also go to the language option. Again, it's an alphabetical list, and if you open one of those, you can see you can see that you have very large languages in here. Here's the largest of all, Chinese, but you also have languages that you might not be familiar with. In fact, chances are you're not familiar with most of the language, because those are indigenous languages often spoken by a fairly small number of people. And to help you navigate and make you understand what those languages are, these are hyperlinks that lead you to a page that not only then lists all the different stories that are associated with that language or to which this language contributed to, but gives you also a link to the Wikipedia article of that language, so that you can then see where that language is spoken, how many people are speaking that language, what language family it belongs to, etc. Also, you have a link here to an online version of the New Testament, or maybe a whole Bible, or maybe just a portion of the Bible that was translated into that language, if such link and such online version is available. Let's go back to our project and let's look at what we would do if we actually want to find information. Let's say that we're studying the book of Mark, the 11th chapter. Let's go to the 11th chapter. And you can see there's many verses listed here in the 11th chapter of Mark. Let's open just one of them. And you can see now that once you open that, on the left-hand side you have the Greek text of Mark, the original text, followed by an English reference translation. And then you have a number of stories. Any of these stories, all of these stories, are associated with that particular verse. It talks about words, phrases, grammatical features of that verse that have to be translated into other languages, and in the and via the translation we can learn something about the text. So for instance, this first one here is a very small story about a Tibetan language calm that had to translate to hold a grudge against someone, and they have achieved that by saying to have someone struck up in your heart. And this is interesting on an academic level, kind of, but it's also interesting on a spiritual level, because I think we can learn something about this concept, something additional about this original concept by looking at that language. You can see that any of the languages is underlined, meaning it's a hyperlink to that language page that we looked at before. And you can also see that if you hold your cursor on the heading of that language, you will see the Greek and or Hebrew text that is being discussed here. Some of these stories here are much bigger than the one we just looked at. So for instance, if you look at the entry about forgiveness, you see many different languages that are being discussed here. And it's interesting and in-depth information sometimes. Every time any kind of information is given, it's always given with its source, so you can understand where we get that information. Also, you will sometimes see little sub-narratives that explain how that language group arrived at that kind of translation. But admittedly, this can sometimes be overwhelming to have so many languages listed here with all the different explanations. So to make it easier, if you don't want to spend the time for an in-depth study, you can also click at this link at the very beginning of that story, and what that does is it opens up a graphic excuse me, that shows all the different back translations on the right hand side in different font sizes, and the different font sizes are determined by the number of languages that have chosen a particular solution to translate this concept or this term. Let's go to the bottom of the page so I can show you a couple more features here. At the bottom of every page you see a search text, a search field that is a dynamic field that you can type into, and you can see that any story that contains this particular term is being listed. Let's choose this first one here, and you can see this is a story about a translation into Chinese, and it's a translation not so much of a word or a term, but it's a grammatical feature that Chinese has that gives us an insight into a different kind of way of seeing the gender of God. In many languages, in most languages, we are sort of forced to see God as male or female or neutral, and in Chinese there is a possibility to describe God as only divine and not bound to any human or neutral gender. This is an interesting story, and because this is really interesting not just for us as likely non-Chinese readers, but it's also an interesting story for Chinese readers who likely are aware of it, but it sort of communicates a lot of pride to a language if a language is able to uniquely describe something in any text, and especially in the biblical text. So for that reason, to be able to communicate that well to Chinese readers, we have then stories like this also translated into Chinese to make it more easily accessible to Chinese readers. The possibilities of this project are endless, and endless in the truest sense of the word, because there is so much data that still needs to be processed. So there is no end date or no expiration date to this project. It will always go on, and but it is, of course, dependent on the data that we are receiving. And so one thing that is important is for you to contribute data if you have any data, but it's also really important, and I would encourage you not only to use the project, but make it known among your environment, your friends and family, your church. It's really important for people who are doing Bible studies, who are preparing sermons, etc., to use this tool, and among anyone that you think would benefit from this tool. Again, it's a very easy to remember website address, tips.translation.bible, and we really hope that you will see you soon.